r/confession, I sabotaged my sister's wedding after she forced a makeover on me. #chunk1. I stared at my reflection in the salon mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. The woman in the glass had mousy brown hair where my vibrant copper red waves used to be. My freckles, the ones I'd spent years learning to love across my cheekbones, had been completely buried under a thick layer of foundation that felt like a mask suffocating my skin. And the dress they'd stuffed me into was some kind of pale pink monstrosity that made me look washed out and 10 years older. "You look beautiful," my sister Claire said, appearing behind me in the mirror with that smile. That signature smile that had always gotten her what she wanted. "See? I told you this would work so much better for the photos." I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, like I was being strangled by something invisible. I'd agreed to be a bridesmaid in her wedding, of course I had. She was my older sister, and despite everything, I loved her. But I had not agreed to this. I had not agreed to have my entire identity erased 3 days before she walked down the aisle. The whole thing had started innocently enough, or at least that's what I thought at the time. Claire had called me exactly 2 weeks before the wedding. I was in my dorm at State, buried under a mountain of organic chemistry notes, when my phone buzzed with her name. She'd sounded stressed but excited, going on about final fittings and flower arrangements and how she just needed everything to be perfect. I'd murmured agreement in all the right places because that's what you do when your older sister is getting married. You support her. You show up. You make it about her day. "I'm arranging some pre-wedding beauty appointments for all the bridesmaids," she'd said, her voice taking on that particular tone she used when she was making decisions for other people and presenting them as collaborative. "Nothing major, just some light touch-ups. Hair, makeup, that kind of thing. I want everyone to look cohesive in the photos." Cohesive. That word should have been my first red flag. "Sure," I'd said, thinking she meant a nice blowout and maybe some professional makeup application. Something fun, like the kind of pampering I occasionally saw other girls in my friend group getting excited about. I'd even felt a little touched that she was including me in that way, treating me like I was old enough to be part of the wedding preparations at her level. I was such an idiot. When I'd arrived at the salon yesterday afternoon, I thought it was just going to be me and maybe some of the other bridesmaids. Instead, Claire was there with a woman she introduced as her vision consultant, an actual person whose job, apparently, was to make sure the bridesmaids matched her aesthetic. The aesthetic she'd apparently been workshopping without telling any of us. "Your sister's coloring is a bit bold," the vision consultant had said, eyeing me like I was a problem to be solved. "The red hair competes with the dress, and the freckles create visual chaos in the photos. We'll need to tone her down." I remember opening my mouth to object. I remember the words forming on my tongue, "This is my hair. These are my freckles." No one asked me, But then Claire had squeezed my hand, that gentle, sisterly squeeze that had always made me feel like I should trust her, and said, "It's just for the day. It washes out. It'll grow back. Trust me, you're going to feel so beautiful." The thing is, I had trusted her. That was the part that made my stomach twist now, looking at this stranger in the mirror. "The makeup is waterproof, so you don't have to worry about crying," the vision consultant had added, and there was something almost cruel in the way she'd said it, like she expected me to cry, like emotional reactions were just another inconvenience to engineer around. The whole appointment had taken 5 hours. 5 hours of sitting in that chair while they stripped away every visible part of my identity. My hair had been sectioned and dyed in a process that took forever, and the smell of the chemicals had made me lightheaded. The foundation had gone on in layers, actual layers, and when I'd asked if it was really necessary, the consultant had explained that my skin tone needed correction to match the wedding's color scheme. But it was the dress that had broken something in me. I'd tried it on after the hair and makeup, stepping out of the dressing room in this pale pink column of tulle and silk that Claire had selected for all her bridesmaids. Except on the other bridesmaids, her work friends, all with their naturally blonde or brunette hair and their clear, makeup-ready skin, it looked elegant and sophisticated. On me, drowning in this brunette disguise and caked in makeup, it looked like I was wearing a costume of someone else's idea of what a bridesmaid should be. "Perfect," Claire had said, tears in her eyes. "You look perfect. You're going to look so good in the photos." The photos. Everything kept coming back to the photos. I had wanted to ask her what was wrong with how I looked before. I had wanted to ask why my red hair was considered a problem, or why my freckles, which literally hundreds of people on the internet had complimented on my Instagram, were visual chaos. I had wanted to ask if maybe, just maybe, the day could be about celebrating her marriage without erasing me from existence. But I hadn't asked any of those things. Instead, I'd smiled in the mirror like a good little sister, and I'd pretended not to notice the relief on Claire's face, as if she'd genuinely been worried I might say no. Now, sitting in the salon chair the morning of the wedding, with only a few hours until the ceremony, I felt something crystallize inside me. Something hard and cold and absolute. It was the thought that arrived quietly, like a whisper, what if I don't have to go through with this? Not the wedding itself. I wasn't going to skip being a bridesmaid, that would be too obvious, too easy to explain away. But there were other ways to make my feelings known. Other ways to reclaim some control over a situation where I'd been completely steamrolled. And then, as if the universe had decided to hand me the perfect opportunity, my phone had buzzed an hour ago with a text from my friend Marcus, who worked in the administrative offices at State. The text that changed everything. #chunk2. Marcus's text had been casual, almost throwaway, *K, saw your sister's fiancé on campus yesterday with some girl. They were getting pretty cozy in the library. Thought you should know, *. I'd stared at that message for a solid 30 seconds, my brain refusing to process it correctly. Marcus wasn't the gossipy type. He was actually one of the most straightforward people I knew, the kind of guy who'd tell you that you had spinach in your teeth at dinner because he genuinely believed honesty was a kindness. So when he sent something like that, he meant it. I'd immediately called him, and he'd answered on the first ring, sounding uncomfortable. "Look, I didn't want to text it, but I figured you'd want to know," he'd said. I was studying in the reference section, and I saw him come in with this girl. They found a quiet corner in the back, and they were, I don't know, sitting really close. She had her head on his shoulder. They were looking at something on his phone and laughing. That could be innocent, I'd said, even as my stomach twisted. I'd never been particularly close to Claire's fiancé, Derek, but I'd never disliked him either. He seemed fine. Pleasant enough. The kind of guy who complimented your outfit at family dinners and asked about your classes. It could be anyone. A friend, a study partner. Maybe, Marcus had said, and the hesitation in his voice told me he didn't think so. But the thing is, I know who she is. She's one of the grad students in the business school. And I've seen them before. Multiple times. Over the last month or so. The salon was beginning to fill up with other bridesmaids, their voices bright and excited as they arrived for final makeup touch-ups. I'd excused myself and gone into the bathroom, locking the door and sitting on the edge of the toilet like my legs had stopped working properly. Are you sure? I'd whispered. Not 100%, obviously. I'm not a detective, Marcus had said. But I'm pretty sure. And I figured. I mean, isn't he getting married today? To your sister? I thought maybe you should tell her before. Yeah, I'd said faintly. Yeah, okay. Thanks for telling me. I'd hung up before he could say anything else, and I'd sat there in that bathroom stall, staring at the tiles on the wall, trying to process this information that had landed in my lap like a bomb with a very short fuse. Here was the thing, I was angry at Claire. I was angry about the hair and the makeup and the dress and the way she treated my appearance like a problem that needed fixing. I was angry about being erased, about being made into a supporting character in her story instead of being treated like a person with agency over my own body and face. But this was different. This wasn't about me anymore. If Derek was cheating, if he was seeing someone else days before his wedding to my sister, then Claire deserved to know. Not because I wanted to hurt her. Not because I wanted revenge disguised as sisterly concern. But because she was about to marry someone who might be actively betraying her, and that was objectively worse than anything that had been done to me. Wasn't it? I'd gone back out to the salon, and Claire had immediately pulled me aside, fussing with my makeup and asking me if I was okay because apparently I looked pale. I'd told her I was just nervous, which wasn't entirely a lie. She'd squeezed my shoulders and told me that everything was going to be perfect, that I was going to feel so beautiful, and I'd felt something twist uncomfortably in my chest. The whole morning had been a blur after that. Hairspray and final touches, bridesmaids gathering and taking photos, the wedding planner running around with a clipboard looking stressed. And through it all, I kept thinking about what I should do. Tell Claire, obviously. I should tell her about Derek and the mystery girl in the library. The responsible thing, the right thing, was to pull her aside and tell her what Marcus had seen, and let her decide what to do with that information. Except. And this was the part that made me feel like a terrible person, like I was standing on the edge of something dark and considering jumping. If I told her now, I would look like the hero. I would be the one who cared about her happiness enough to deliver bad news on her wedding day. The makeover thing would fade into the background as a minor vanity issue in comparison to actual infidelity. She might even feel guilty for forcing the transformation on me, might even apologize. And Derek would be caught, embarrassed, forced into a conversation about his behavior. The wedding would either be cancelled or would proceed under this cloud of doubt and hurt. Or, and here was where the dark thought really took root, I could wait. I could get through the ceremony with my brown hair and buried freckles, smile for the photos, pretend everything was fine. I could even go to the reception and dance and give a toast. And then, once the day was over, once Claire had her perfect wedding that she cared about so much, I could tell her the truth. The thought made me feel sick, but it also made me feel something else, powerful. For the first time since I'd walked into that salon yesterday, I felt like I had control over something. But there was a complication I hadn't fully considered until I was standing in the bridal suite about 40 minutes before the ceremony, watching Claire put on her dress. She looked genuinely happy. Not the performative happiness she'd been displaying all morning for the wedding planner and the photographer and the other bridesmaids. This was real, uncomplicated joy. The kind of happiness that comes from believing something good is about to happen, from trusting someone completely. She caught my eye in the mirror and smiled at me, not that manipulative smile she'd used in the salon, but something softer and more genuine. Thank you for being here, she said. For being my bridesmaid. For always being someone I can count on. The words felt like a knife between my ribs. I was someone she could count on. That's exactly what made this so complicated. Because the choice I was facing wasn't really between telling her now or telling her later. It was between being the sister who protected her from the truth on the day she wanted to believe she was getting married for life, and being the sister who let her walk down an aisle towards someone who might be betraying her. And I realized, with a sickening clarity, that no matter what I did next, one of those versions of me would be the villain. Chunk 3. The ceremony started at 4 p.m., and at 3:47 p.m., I was still standing in the bridal suite trying to figure out how to betray my sister without actually betraying her. Claire was doing a final walkthrough with her wedding planner, checking off some last-minute detail about the flower arrangements. I watched her move around the room with this careful grace, like she was afraid one wrong step would shatter the day into pieces. She'd changed into her dress now, this incredible ivory gown with delicate beading that caught the light when she moved. She looked like something out of a magazine. She looked happy. And I was standing here with information that could burn it all down. My phone buzzed silently in my clutch. I pulled it out just enough to see the notification, a text from Marcus. Did you tell her? I didn't respond. What would I even say? You look like you're going to be sick, someone said. I looked up. It was Sarah, Claire's best friend and maid of honor, holding a glass of water toward me. Sarah had known Claire since high school. They'd planned this wedding together for 2 years. Sarah was wearing a navy blue dress that matched mine, her blonde hair pulled back in an elaborate twist. She was looking at me with a mix of concern and curiosity. I'm fine, I said, taking the water. Just nervous. First big wedding? Sarah asked, perching on the edge of the vanity. No, I've been in a couple. Just this one feels important. Sarah smiled. Claire's important. She's like my sister too, you know? I just want her to be happy. I think Derek's good for her. He's stable, you know? Good job, family money, the whole thing. My last boyfriend was such a mess. I drank the water to avoid responding. The whole thing. Derek's stability, his good job, his family money. None of that seemed particularly relevant when the guy was apparently cozying up to graduate students in the library. But then again, what did I actually know? I hadn't seen it myself. I only had Marcus's word for it, and while I trusted Marcus, I also knew that context could change everything. What if they were just friends? What if the girl in the library had been going through something and Derek was being a decent human? What if there was a perfectly innocent explanation that I was about to destroy a marriage over? Has Derek ever mentioned anyone from campus? I asked carefully. Like other grad students or anything? Sarah raised her eyebrows. I don't think so. Why? No reason. Just making conversation. But Sarah wasn't stupid. She was watching me now with a different expression, something more alert. Is there something wrong? Did something happen? No, I stopped. I had to stop doing this. If I kept asking leading questions, someone was going to figure out that something was off. I'm just thinking about how crazy it is that they met online, and now they're getting married. It's romantic, you know? Makes you wonder what could have happened if they hadn't connected. It was a deflection, and Sarah seemed to buy it, but her eyes still had that assessing quality. She was smart. She'd probably known Claire longer than I had. And if I told her what Marcus had told me, she'd probably march straight to Derek and demand answers before the ceremony even started. It is pretty romantic, Sarah agreed. Claire's going to have such a great life. I can feel it. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with irony I couldn't acknowledge. My phone buzzed again. This time I didn't check it. The wedding planner was herding everyone toward the door. It was time. The bridesmaids needed to line up, the ceremony was starting. Claire was going to walk down that aisle in approximately 5 minutes, and I still hadn't made a decision. I was going to have to decide in real time, with no preparation, no space to think. I was going to have to look at my sister's face and choose in that moment whether to tell her the truth or let her marry a potentially cheating asshole. As we filed out of the bridal suite and toward the ceremonial entrance, I caught sight of Derek at the altar. He looked nervous in that way grooms do, tugging at his cuffs, swallowing hard, his eyes fixed on the aisle where Claire would appear. He looked like a man about to marry the woman he loved. Or he looked like a man about to successfully pull off a con. The thing about moments like this is that they move fast. 1 second you're standing in the back of the chapel with the other bridesmaids, and the next the music is starting. The guests are standing. The bride is walking toward her future. I watched Claire's face as she saw Derek. Watched her light up like he was the sun and she'd been living in darkness. Watched her trust shine out of her like something physical and real. I could tell her now. I could stop the ceremony. I could walk up to that altar and whisper something to Derek, or pull Claire aside at the last second, or just create some kind of disruption that would force everything to stop and be examined. I had maybe 3 seconds to make that choice. 3 seconds. That's all the time I got. And what I did in those 3 seconds was nothing. I stood there in my brown hair and hidden freckles, in the dress that made me feel like a stranger, and I let my sister marry a man who might be cheating on her. I didn't tell her. I watched her say I do without any fucking idea that I was keeping secrets that could destroy her. I watched her kiss Derek while I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste blood. I watched them turn to face the guests as husband and wife, and I clapped when everyone else clapped, and I smiled when I needed to smile. And somewhere in the middle of my silence, I made another choice. I would wait. I would get through this reception with a smile on my face. I would congratulate them and dance and pretend to be happy. And when the day was over, when Claire had gotten everything she wanted from this wedding, I would tell her the truth. She deserved to know, yes. But maybe she also deserved to have this one day of happiness first. Maybe I could give her that much, at least, before I became the sister who ruined her marriage. Except as I was thinking this, as I was justifying my silence with the rationalization that I was being kind, I felt something crystallize inside me. Something cold and hard and wrong. I wasn't being kind. I was being cruel. I was choosing my sister's temporary happiness over her actual well-being, and I was calling it love. And worse, part of me was doing it because I was still angry about the makeover. That realization hit me like a physical blow, and I gripped the bouquet so hard my hand started to shake. What kind of person did that make me? #chunk4. The reception was exactly what I expected, elegant, expensive, and suffocating. We were in this beautiful ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens, white roses everywhere, champagne flowing like water. The kind of wedding that costs more than my yearly tuition. Everything was perfect. Everything was a lie. I made it through the cocktail hour on autopilot. I smiled at relatives I hadn't seen in years. I accepted compliments on how nice I looked, which felt particularly ironic given that I was wearing a completely altered version of myself. Aunt Linda cornered me by the shrimp tower and spent 15 minutes talking about my hair, how much better I looked as a brunette, how the color was more sophisticated. I wanted to scream at her. Instead, I ate a shrimp and nodded. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon. Marcus had texted 4 times. By the 4th message, the tone had shifted from casual check-ins to something more urgent. *, we need to talk about this. You can't just not tell her *. This isn't just about you anymore. He's lying to her *. Call me. I hadn't responded to any of them. What could I say? That I'd decided to let my sister marry someone who was potentially cheating on her. That I'd made a choice in the span of 3 seconds that I wasn't even sure I could explain to myself, let alone to Marcus? During dinner, I sat at the bridal party table between Sarah and one of Derek's groomsmen, some guy named Brandon who worked with Derek at his firm and wouldn't stop talking about their fantasy football league. I pushed my salmon around my plate and tried not to think about Derek's hands on Claire's waist as they did their first dance. That's when things started to get complicated. Sarah had been drinking. Not drunk, but definitely past her second glass of champagne, with that looseness that comes when people start saying things they might not say otherwise. She leaned over during Brandon's monologue about his quarterback's injury and grabbed my arm. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. Sure, I said, already dreading whatever was coming. Why were you asking me about Derek before the ceremony? That question about grad students and stuff? She was looking at me directly now, her earlier assessment replaced with something more probing. That wasn't random, was it? My stomach dropped. I was just making conversation. No, you weren't. You got this look on your face. Like you were fishing for something. Sarah set down her champagne glass with deliberate care. Is there something about Derek I should know? Something Claire should know? I felt the blood drain from my face. This was the moment. This was where I could unburden myself, tell Sarah what Marcus had told me, and let someone else carry some of the weight of this secret. Sarah loved Claire. If anyone should know, it should be her. But what exactly would I be telling her? That Marcus had seen Derek talking to a graduate student in the library? That Derek had looked cozy with her? That was it. That was my entire piece of evidence, and it could mean absolutely nothing. No, I said carefully. There's nothing. I was just curious about Derek, that's all. Getting to know my new brother-in-law. Sarah studied me for what felt like forever. The music was loud enough that Brandon had returned his attention to the fantasy football guy next to him, but Sarah was still locked onto me like a tracker. You're a bad liar, she said finally. Like, really bad. Your eye twitches. My eye doesn't twitch. It absolutely does. Look, whatever this is, you should probably tell Claire instead of sitting on it. Secrets have a way of coming out, and they're always worse when they do. She said it gently, but it landed like an accusation. Because that's what I was doing, wasn't I? Sitting on something. Deciding unilaterally that my sister didn't get to know information that might affect her marriage. Playing God with someone else's life because I couldn't face the possibility of being the bad guy. There's nothing to tell, I repeated, and Sarah sighed and shook her head like she didn't believe me but also didn't have the energy to argue about it. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. There were toasts, Derek's dad went on forever about Derek's accomplishments, Claire's father cried talking about how beautiful his daughter looked, and Sarah gave this heartfelt speech about friendship and trust and knowing someone inside and out. I watched Claire laugh at Sarah's stories about their college days, watched her lean against Derek's shoulder, and felt like I was watching someone walk blind toward a cliff. By the time dessert came around, I had made a new decision. A different decision from the one I'd made before the ceremony. I was going to tell her. Not today, obviously, I wasn't completely heartless. But tomorrow. Or the day after. Soon enough that it mattered, but not so soon that I was completely destroying her wedding night. Except then I saw Claire heading toward the bathroom, and I saw Derek's phone light up on the table next to his plate. The screen illuminated for just a second, and I saw a text notification before it faded. Can't stop thinking about you. I stared at the phone. I stared at Derek, who was talking to Brandon about something, completely oblivious. The message had come through at 9:47 p.m. on his wedding day. His wife was in the bathroom, and someone was texting him that they couldn't stop thinking about him. The rage that flooded through me was so intense it made my vision go slightly red. This wasn't a rumor. This wasn't something Marcus had maybe misinterpreted. This was proof. This was Derek, on his wedding day, receiving love notes from someone else while my sister was upstairs wearing white. I looked around quickly. Brandon was distracted. Sarah was talking to Claire's mother. The chaos of the reception was loud enough that no one was paying attention to the bridal party table. I could reach over. I could grab that phone. I could look at the full conversation thread and see exactly how far this had gone. My hand was actually moving toward the phone when Derek reached out and flipped it over, face down on the table. He didn't look at me. He didn't acknowledge what I'd almost done. But he'd seen me moving. He knew that I'd seen that text. For a moment, we locked eyes. And in that moment, Derek's expression shifted from casual grim contentment to something else. Something calculating. Something that looked a lot like a threat. He smiled at me. It wasn't a nice smile. Then he turned back to Brandon like nothing had happened. My hands were shaking. This had just become something much bigger than keeping a secret. #Chunk5. The rest of the reception became a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I sat frozen at that table, my hands trembling so badly I had to grip my lap to keep them still. Derek had seen me. Derek knew that I knew something was wrong. And worse, Derek had looked at me like I was a problem that needed solving. I excused myself from the table under the pretense of needing to use the bathroom, but really I just needed to breathe. I locked myself in one of the ornate powder rooms on the second floor of the venue and stared at my reflection. The brown hair, the makeup that wasn't mine, the dress that didn't fit my body or my personality, I didn't recognize myself. And maybe that was fitting, because I didn't recognize my own life anymore either. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Did you tell her? I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because now I had actual, physical evidence that Derek was being unfaithful, which meant I had to tell Claire, which meant I had to destroy her marriage on her wedding day, which meant I had to be the person who ended this fairy tale. And Derek clearly knew I'd seen something. The implications of that kept spiraling in my head. Derek was smart, he worked at some fancy law firm. He would know that I'd seen the text. He would be thinking about how to manage me, how to contain this situation. Maybe he'd already decided what he was going to do about me. I stayed in that bathroom for 20 minutes, long enough that Sarah found me. She knocked lightly on the door. Hey, you okay in there? I opened the door to find my sister looking worried, still holding her champagne glass, her makeup slightly smudged from laughing at the toasts. Fine, I lied. Just needed a minute. She studied me with that same probing look she'd given me at dinner. You're still lying. Your eye is twitching again. She stepped into the bathroom with me and closed the door. Okay, I'm going to ask you directly, and I want you to tell me the truth. Does this have something to do with Derek? I opened my mouth. Closed it. The words were right there, ready to spill out. Asterisk yes. Derek is cheating on Claire. I saw proof. You need to get her alone and tell her before this gets worse asterisk. But then I thought about what would happen next. The confrontation. The scene. Claire would cry, probably scream. The wedding would officially be ruined, not subtly and invisibly like I'd first planned, but publicly and catastrophically. And Derek would know exactly who had done it. He would know it was me. No, I said quietly. It doesn't have anything to do with Derek. Sarah's expression hardened. You know what? I don't believe you. And I think whatever this is, you're making a huge mistake by not telling Claire right now. Sarah. No. I'm serious. I've seen this happen before. Someone knows something, they sit on it because they're scared or conflicted or whatever, and by the time the truth comes out, it's 10 times worse. It destroys relationships faster than the original lie ever could have. She was right, and that made everything worse somehow. I can't talk about this right now, I said, which wasn't exactly a denial but wasn't quite a confirmation either. She stared at me for another long moment, then shook her head. Fine. Don't talk about it. But know that whatever you're doing, whatever you're deciding right now, you're going to have to live with that choice. And so will Claire. Then she left, and I was alone again with my brown hair and my thick makeup and my borrowed dress, looking like a stranger in the mirror. I made it through the rest of the reception by becoming a ghost. I danced when required, smiled when directed, and avoided Derek entirely. More importantly, I avoided Claire. Because if I looked at her too directly, if I let myself think too hard about what she didn't know, I was going to fall apart. Around midnight, people started leaving. The bouquet toss had happened. I'd deliberately thrown my arm out and caught it, which felt like cosmic punishment. The cake had been cut. The new Mr. and Mrs. Derek Whitmore had their last dance. That's when Derek cornered me by the coat check. I was reaching for my bag, desperate to get out of there, when his hand appeared next to mine. He didn't grab me or anything dramatic like that. He just stood there, very close, in his perfect tailored suit with his perfect hair, and he smiled that not nice smile again. We should talk, he said quietly. About what you saw. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. I don't know what you mean, I said, reaching for my coat. Yes, you do. His voice was smooth, controlled. You saw something tonight that you shouldn't have seen. And now you're thinking about what to do with that information. I didn't respond. I was calculating distances to exits, wondering if anyone would notice if I just left him standing there and walked out. Here's the thing, Derek continued, and his tone was almost friendly now, which was somehow more terrifying. Whatever you think you know, you should think very carefully about what happens next. Because if you go to Claire with some half-baked theory about a text message, you're going to look like a bridesmaid who's jealous of her sister. You're going to look unstable. And you know what? I'll have a perfectly reasonable explanation for everything, and Claire will believe me because she loves me and she trusts me, and why would she trust you over her husband? I found my voice, though it came out smaller than I wanted. That text message was pretty clear. Was it? He tilted his head slightly. How clear? Did you read the whole conversation? Do you know the context? Did you consider for a second that maybe it was something innocent that you're misinterpreting? He paused. And more importantly, how are you going to prove you even saw it without admitting that you were snooping through my phone? Oh. I hadn't thought of that. Furthermore, he said, if you make accusations like that, if you try to interfere in my marriage, I will make sure everyone in your family knows that you sabotaged your sister's wedding day because you couldn't handle not being the center of attention. I'll tell them you tried to ruin her life out of jealousy. And given that you're here under false pretenses, that you don't usually look like this, that your sister had to basically force you to get ready, do you really think your credibility is going to hold up? He wasn't raising his voice. He wasn't being overtly threatening. He was just laying out the facts as he saw them, and they were facts that made me feel completely powerless. You seem like a smart girl, Derek said. So I'm going to trust that you'll make the right decision and keep your mouth shut about tonight. For Claire's sake, obviously. You wouldn't want to hurt her just because you saw something you didn't understand. Then he straightened his jacket, patted me once on the shoulder in a way that made my skin crawl, and walked back toward the ballroom where my sister was probably getting ready to leave for her honeymoon. And I stood there, holding my coat, realizing that I had somehow managed to lose control of this entire situation. #Chunk6. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my childhood bed in my parents' house, staring at the ceiling, replaying Derek's words over and over again like a song stuck on repeat. You'll look unstable. I'll have a reasonable explanation. Who are they going to believe? The worst part was that he was probably right. My phone had been buzzing intermittently since I got home. Messages in a family group chat about how beautiful the wedding was, how happy Claire looked, how Derek seemed like such a great guy. Each notification felt like a small knife twist. Around 3 a.m., I got up and went to the bathroom to look at myself. The brown dye had held up remarkably well throughout the night, despite everything. I ran my fingers through it, thinking about how easy it would be to just wash it out. To reclaim that part of myself. But I didn't. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bathtub and cried quietly, trying not to wake my parents. By morning, I had exactly 0 answers and 1,000 more questions. My mom made pancakes, which was her thing when she sensed something was wrong. She didn't push, just placed the plate in front of me and sat down with her coffee. Dad was already at his office. He had a habit of disappearing into work when things got complicated at home. Your sister called, Mom said carefully. She and Derek are leaving for their honeymoon in a few hours. She wanted to know if you'd be okay. If I'd be okay, the irony was almost funny. Tell her I'm fine, I said, cutting into my pancakes without actually eating any of them. You're not fine. Mom set down her coffee mug. I can always tell when you're not fine. You get that look. What look? Like the world is ending and you're the only one who knows about it. She waited a beat. Is this about the makeover? Because I told Claire that was a mistake. I told her not to surprise you like that you were going to feel. It's not about the makeover, I interrupted, which wasn't technically a lie. Then what? I stared at my pancakes. For a moment, just a brief, shining moment, I considered telling her everything. My mom. She would know what to do. She would probably know how to approach this in a way that didn't make me look like the villain. But then I thought about how this information would travel through the family. How it would splinter everything. And I thought about Derek's threat, about how he would spin it, about how he probably had contingencies already planned out. He was a lawyer. Contingency planning was literally his job. I'm just tired, I told her. The wedding was a lot. She didn't look convinced, but she also didn't push further. Instead, she squeezed my hand and went back to her coffee. That somehow made it worse, her kindness, her willingness to let it go. I felt like I was actively lying to her now, which I was. And I hated that Derek had put me in this position where silence felt like complicity. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Sarah. *, we need to talk. Call me, *. I stared at the message for a full minute before calling her back. Hey, she answered immediately, like she'd been waiting. Where are you? Home. Why? Okay, I'm coming over. Don't go anywhere. Sarah, what's? But she'd already hung up. Sarah arrived 20 minutes later with her hair still wet from the shower and what looked like the same clothes from the night before, just hastily changed into. She looked worried in a way that made my stomach drop further. We need to talk about Derek, she said without preamble, pulling me into the kitchen and closing the door so Mom wouldn't hear. And we need to do it now. What about Derek? I asked, though my heart was already racing. I went back to the coat check to grab something I left behind, and I saw him talking to you. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I could tell from your face that something serious was happening. So I waited by the hallway until he left, and then I came over to you, and you looked absolutely terrified. I opened my mouth. Closed it. So I'm going to ask you this one more time, Sarah continued, her voice steady and serious in a way that reminded me why she was the older sister, the responsible one, the one who actually had her life figured out. What did Derek say to you? And don't lie to me. I can tell when you're lying, your eye twitches. I was about to respond when we heard Mom's footsteps in the hallway. Sarah grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the back door that led to the garden. We stepped outside into the cool morning air, and she didn't let go of my arm until we were far enough away from the house that we couldn't be heard. Tell me, she said. So I did. Not everything. I left out the parts about sabotaging the wedding in the first place, because that felt like it would complicate things further. But I told her about the text, about what I'd seen, about Derek's threats, about how he'd essentially told me that no one would believe me and that if I tried to say anything, he'd make sure everyone thought I was a jealous, unstable bridesmaid trying to ruin her sister's marriage. Sarah's face got darker and darker as I talked. He threatened you, she asked when I finished. Not in a violent way. More like he explained how he would destroy my credibility if I said anything. That's still a threat. She started pacing, her hands clenched into fists. And it's also textbook manipulative behavior. God, I can't believe I didn't see this coming. He was always a little too smooth, you know? A little too interested in controlling how things looked. So what do I do? I asked. Because I can't just let Claire find out on her own, but I also can't tell her without making myself look like a crazy person. No, Sarah said, stopping mid-pace. But I can. I stared at her. What? Think about it. You saw something on a phone that wasn't yours. Your credibility is already compromised. But I can go to Claire and tell her that Derek has been showing signs of infidelity. I can tell her that I'm concerned, and I wanted to warn her. She'll listen to me. She trusts me. And then, if she wants to investigate further, she can do it herself. It was smart. It was clean. It was exactly the kind of thing Sarah would come up with. But it was also going to blow everything up, and Derek was going to know exactly why. He'll know it came from me, I said quietly. Probably, Sarah agreed. But that's the point. We're not going to let him control this narrative anymore. #Chunk7. Sarah's words hung in the air between us like a challenge, and I felt something shift inside my chest, a strange mixture of relief and dread that made it hard to breathe. If you do this, I said slowly, there's no taking it back. I know. She's going to hate both of us. Probably, Sarah admitted. She sat down on the garden bench, and I joined her, our shoulders almost touching. But she's going to hate Derek more once she figures out what he's been doing. And maybe, eventually, she'll understand why we did this. And if she doesn't? Sarah didn't answer that. Instead, she pulled out her phone and opened her text conversation with Claire. I watched her type, *K, I know you're about to leave for your honeymoon, but I need to talk to you about something important. Can you call me before you go, *? She hit send before I could protest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Finally, a phone call request came through. Sarah answered on the first ring. Hey, Claire. Yeah, I know you're leaving soon. This will just take a minute. No, everything's fine with me. It's actually about Derek. Look, I've been thinking about this all morning, and I didn't feel right not saying anything. Has he ever mentioned an ex named Victoria? Yeah, Victoria Castellano. Okay, so I saw her at the reception last night. She was there with a guy, and Derek spent a solid 20 minutes talking to her in the corner by the bar. No, I don't think it was innocent. He kept touching her arm, and the way he was looking at her. I turned away. I couldn't watch this happen. This was the moment everything changed, the point of no return, and it was happening because of me. Because I'd looked at that phone. Because I'd discovered something I wasn't supposed to know. Because I'd let Derek intimidate me instead of immediately telling someone. Claire, slow down. I know, but listen. I think you need to ask him directly. Because I care about you, and I think you deserve to know if your husband is keeping secrets. No, I'm not saying he definitely cheated. I'm saying something isn't right, and you have the right to figure out what it is before you get on a plane for 2 weeks. Okay. Yeah, of course. I'll be here. Love you too. She hung up. We sat in silence for a long moment. The garden smelled like wet earth and roses, completely at odds with a feeling of impending catastrophe that had settled over everything. She's asking him now, Sarah said quietly. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Then again, rapid-fire messages flooding my screen. I didn't want to look, but I did. You really couldn't let this go, could you, Derek? I tried to be reasonable about this, Derek. Now your sister is asking me completely unhinged questions about an ex from 5 years ago, Derek. This is going to destroy Claire's honeymoon. I hope you're happy, Derek. He's texting you? Sarah asked, reading over my shoulder. He's blaming me. Of course he is. That's what people like that do, they make themselves the victim. My phone rang. It was Claire. I almost didn't answer, but Sarah gave me a look that said I had to. Hey, I said weakly. What the hell is going on? Claire's voice was sharp, edged with something between fury and panic. Derek says you've been spreading rumors about him cheating. He says you've been jealous this whole time and you're trying to ruin my marriage because of the makeover thing. Of course. Exactly what I'd feared. Exactly what Derek had warned me he would do. It's not, I started, but she cut me off. Sarah's saying the same thing, but with different details. She's talking about someone named Victoria? Derek says he was just being polite to an old friend. He said you probably misinterpreted something or made something up because you're upset about the wedding preparations. I could feel the trap closing around me. He'd anticipated this. He prepared a defense, a narrative, a way to make me look unstable. Did you ask him about his phone? I asked. There was a pause. What do you mean, his phone? I made a decision. A stupid, reckless decision that probably made everything worse, but I couldn't stop myself. He was texting someone named V. Before the ceremony. He said he was handling something. You could. He told me about that, Claire interrupted. He was texting Victoria to confirm she was coming to the reception. They went to college together. He said he was being polite because she was coming alone and he wanted to make sure she felt included. It sounded reasonable when Derek said it. That was the thing about him, he had an explanation for everything. A reason. A justification that made perfect sense if you wanted to believe it. Claire, I wouldn't lie to you about this, I said, and I meant it. I wouldn't lie. I was just omitting the part where I'd snooped through his phone without permission. The part where I'd seen things that could be interpreted multiple ways depending on who was looking. I don't even know what to believe anymore, she said, and she sounded so tired, so disappointed. You sabotaged yourself at the wedding, and now you're trying to sabotage my marriage. What is wrong with you? What did I ever do to you besides try to help you look good? The makeover. She was bringing it back to the makeover, as if everything that had happened since was just fallout from my hurt feelings about hair dye. The makeover wasn't help, I said quietly. It was erasing me. And maybe I was wrong too, I stopped myself. I didn't sabotage anything. Derek is the one who's been. I don't want to hear this right now. I need to get ready to leave for my honeymoon. The one I'm now going to spend wondering if my husband is faithful. So thanks for that. Really. I hope this makes you feel better about your pathetic life choices. She hung up. I stared at my phone, feeling something inside me crack open. Sarah reached over and took the phone from my hand. That was horrible, she said. I'm sorry. That was your fault? I finished bitterly. No, it's my fault. I'm the one who looked at the phone. I'm the one who opened this door. You're the one who did the right thing, Sarah corrected. You exposed someone who was being dishonest. And yes, maybe we handled it imperfectly, but now Claire hates me. Derek has successfully positioned himself as the victim, and everyone thinks I'm some jealous, unstable psycho who ruined her sister's wedding day. I laughed without any humor. So I guess I actually did sabotage the wedding after all. Just not in the way I planned. #Chunk8. The silence that followed stretched for days. I didn't go home. I couldn't face my parents yet, couldn't handle the questions and the disappointment and the inevitable taking of sides. Instead, I stayed at Sarah's apartment, cycling through anger and guilt with no relief in sight. I checked my phone obsessively, hoping Claire would message. She didn't. Derek did, increasingly threatening texts that I screenshot and saved, each one a small piece of validation that at least I wasn't crazy. The messages escalated from blame to gaslighting to outright intimidation. You should be careful what you say about me, people won't believe you, I could sue you for defamation. Sarah urged me to screenshot everything and save it somewhere safe. I did. On day 4, my mother called. We need to talk, she said without preamble. Your father and I are very disappointed in how you've handled this situation. Mom. Claire is devastated. Her marriage is already on shaky ground because of accusations you've made with no proof whatsoever. Do you understand the gravity of what you've done? I almost laughed. No proof. As if the screenshots of Derek's messages to Victoria didn't count. As if the pattern of his behavior, the control, the manipulation, the way he tried to intimidate me into silence, didn't matter because I hadn't caught him in a photograph kissing someone else. He was manipulating her, I said quietly. He is manipulating her. And he tried to manipulate me into staying quiet about it. What we have here is a he said she said situation, and frankly, your behavior at the wedding has cast serious doubt on your reliability. You intentionally looked bad in your bridesmaid photos. You embarrassed your sister. And now you're trying to destroy her marriage out of spite. I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm trying to protect her from what? A man who came to her college graduation? Who was mutual friends with her? Who she chose to marry? My mother's voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. You need to apologize. To Claire. To Derek. To all of us for dragging this family through this humiliation. I'm not apologizing for telling the truth. Then don't expect us to support you when this blows up in your face. She hung up. I sat on Sarah's couch in the dark, staring at nothing, and felt something inside me crystallize. Not break, crystallize. Like grief turning into something harder, something more permanent. My family had made their choice. They'd chosen the narrative that was easier to accept, the version of events that didn't require them to confront the reality that my sister had married someone toxic. Sarah found me like that hours later and didn't ask questions. She just sat next to me and put on a terrible reality show, the kind that required zero emotional investment. My mom called, I said eventually. Yeah. Your dad called me asking if I was conspiring with you. I told him that was a weird word choice for a family conversation. I almost smiled at that. Almost. What if they're right? I asked. What if I'm overreacting? What if Derek was just being friendly with Victoria and I completely misread the situation? Do you actually believe that? Sarah asked. I thought about Derek's messages. The way he tried to intimidate me. The conversations I'd seen on his phone, not just with Victoria, but with other women, all conducted with a careful tone that was intimate without being explicitly sexual. A tone designed to keep options open. A tone of someone who didn't respect his wife enough to stop. No, I said. I don't. Then that's your answer. I didn't hear from Claire for 2 weeks. Then, on a Tuesday, I got a message. Can we talk? I met her at a coffee shop near campus, somewhere neutral. She looked smaller than I remembered, even though logically I knew that was impossible. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she didn't have her wedding ring on. He admitted to emotional affairs, she said without preamble. Not physical cheating, apparently, but emotionally intimate relationships with 3 different women over the past 2 years. He said it was because I was cold and distant and he needed to feel valued. I didn't say anything. I knew better than to fill the silence with validation. I'm filing for an annulment, Claire continued. I looked at his phone, with his permission this time, after threatening to leave, and there's more. So much more. Conversations with women from work, from college, from every part of his life. He's been collecting them like trading cards. She laughed, but it was a broken sound. You were right, she said. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the makeover. I'm sorry for not listening to you. I'm sorry for letting him convince me that you were the problem when you were just trying to protect me. I reached across the table, and after a moment of hesitation, Claire took my hand. I'm sorry too, I said. For how I handled it. For snooping through his phone without telling you. I should have just told you what I found instead of. Instead of letting me discover it myself? Claire squeezed my hand. Maybe. But you also could have told me and I wouldn't have believed you. Derek would have explained it away, and I would have chosen to trust him over my own sister. At least this way, he had to explain to me directly. We sat like that for a while, 2 sisters on opposite sides of the table from where we'd been a week ago, finding our way back to each other across the wreckage of her marriage. He's claiming you seduced him into showing you his phone, Claire said eventually. He's telling people that you were jealous about his attention to Victoria and that you're trying to break us up so he'll pay attention to you. Of course he is. I'm telling everyone the truth. That you found something and you told me, and that my marriage ending is on him, not you. She paused. And I'm telling Mom and Dad that if they don't apologize to you, they're going to lose me too. I felt something inside my chest loosen for the first time in weeks. You don't have to do that, I said. I do, actually. Because you were right about all of it. And family is supposed to matter more than protecting someone's pride or keeping the peace. She smiled sadly. I learned that the hard way. When I left that coffee shop, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired and relieved and sad for my sister's broken marriage. But I also felt something else, the knowledge that I'd done the right thing, even when it cost me everything. Even when it meant losing my family temporarily, even when it meant being painted as the villain. The truth had mattered. And eventually, I realized, the people who loved me would understand that.